Hello, hello, hello. All right.
18th, right?
Yep.
Have any more
Let's do less,
common
no,
sense?
those are just the 537 and 539 ones, yeah,
So far as we know, everybody's coming but Teresa, right?
that's, I think, all we've heard, yeah.
You guys know Teresa's not going to
Right.
be.
Spain,
Yeah, she's in, I think
She's
she's
out
in
of country, yep.
Madrid.
Out of country, yeah. There he is.
There he is.
Bearded man.
He does kind of have the Santa thing still going, man.
Do not say Santa.
You don't have the poundage.
Charlie Brown. There you go.
Hey, man, I think that's a compliment, man. Chuck's my man.
Go kick a football.
Well, that would be about the same result. That would actually be a little too accurate.
Monday, December 18th meeting of the City of Monona Finance and Personnel Committee. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder DePula.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Let's see, we are going to be approving the minutes at the next meeting. So, moving on down the agenda, there are no appearances, no unfinished business. Under new business, item 6A, consideration of resolution 23-12-2662, purchase approval for a new Parks and Recreation truck. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mark,
Yeah,
you're going to address this?
I'll just quickly talk about this. Jake said he'll be here at council tonight, and if you look on the council agenda, he has it started for immediate action, so just so you're aware of that. So what this is part of the 2024 capital budget. This was approved. The resolution does have a wrong number. It says 65, or 60, it should be 65 in the first whereas. So if there's a way to correct that, you can do that. So part of the capital budget for 2024 was to replace the 2005 GMC. As you can see, in the packet, you can see he was replacing it with the 2024 Ford Super Duty F-25 250. And And this is also to include eventually a lot of staff, snow plow, and for snow removal, parking lots, any other future paths that we might have to. So we did budget $65,000 for that. The purchase price is $58,737. The reason why this is in here in the 2023 right now is because there's such a lead time on these purchases. So Jake, it says 90, 120 days. So basically, as everybody kind of heard over the last year or so, the supply chain line and getting them ordered, just to make sure that we get it in 2024 is a priority. So this is what this is for.
Questions, Doug?
One correction in the now therefore be it resolved clause, it refers to it as an F-150, and the
Oh.
new truck is an F-250.
Oh.
So heavier duty.
Yeah.
Oh,
Heavy duty or
heavy duty-er, yeah.
That's right.
And again, this is on the Wisconsin state bid, so that's why there's no, we just have the one bid using the state
Oh, okay.
bid process.
So that correction is noted. Anyone else?
No.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder DePula.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Moving on to item 6B, consideration of Resolution 23-12-2663, amending the 2023 capital budget for library fireplace replacement. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Is
Yeah, I thought
someone
Ryan-
going to
I thought
address this?
Ryan was actually going to join us here, but he must have gotten sidetracked.
Yeah, I don't know much about, maybe I'll just talk about the numbers. So I don't know so much, I know the fireplace is broken and needs replacement. As far as that detail, I don't know a ton about. But we did borrow in the 2023 capital budget, $25,000 for the landscape garden site on the corners of Nichols and Schluter Road. Due to the financial cost of it was more than what we budgeted, $25,000. And according to Brad Broom, that this will actually be, this sign could be part of the 2000, I don't know what year it is, the Nichols Street project reconstruction.
26.
Yeah, so I think that's what that would be. So instead of using it for a sign, to use it for a brand-new sign, to wait and put it as part of the Nichols project. So we had 25 budgeted, we did not spend it. The 14,000 would cover the fireplace to be fixed. One thing also, I know there's some issues fixing it up. We still would have that extra money there, 11,000, to do some fixing repairs if needed.
Of the sign?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think Ryan Claringbo, the library director, Alder Wood raised that issue because this money for that, along with a big donation for the children's department, came from the Gregory family, Dick and Harriet. Dick had been president of the library board for years, and Harriet was a big volunteer in the Friends, and some of the letters are missing, so I think Ryan has agreed he's going to fix that and repair the sign door. Is that the...
Yeah, I think they'll have to
glass.
replace the frame to do that. I mean, I don't know. It's definitely worked, so it doesn't close.
Yeah. Did we have a motion for this?
Yes.
Yes.
Any questions for anyone? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 6C, acceptance of general fund accounts payable checks dated December 1st through the 14th, 2023. Documentation of invoices paid is available in the city clerk's office. Mark.
Yeah, not a lot of stuff in here. Just going to touch on a couple things. Page 22, Becker Professional Services. They're our TIF consulting. So this will come up tonight in the TIF 9 or TIF 10. City Council. Capital Underground main break repairs. That was needed. Page 25, KSW Construction Corp. Finishing up on the fire department restroom project. I believe that's done. Quick Trip is underneath that is their unleaded gas We use Landmarks for diesel. What was the other one? I think that's all I have.
Any questions about the bills?
No, not at this time.
Is there a motion to accept the bills?
Move to accept the bill.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did you say aye?
Yes.
Thank you. Bills are accepted. Final item, 6D, staff presentation and discussion with possible action of historical call data as it relates to public safety staffing requests. Neil, do you want to do a little intro for this?
Yep, absolutely. Obviously, I think alders recall, we've got work done and had departments submit a list of potential future personnel requests related to referendum going forward that we'd like to see, and it's not only for the referendum, but also for the design of the civic building in terms of what our future needs might be. A significant part of that was obviously our public safety divisions. So we've asked both chiefs to just come in and briefly kind of provide some historical call data and some projections, and just as well as kind of tying that into their position requests, and then just be available to answer some questions. So
Miller Communications, who's handling our
specifically has
communications.
requested this.
Yeah, they requested what call data for 10 years, right, or something.
Correct.
So we thought it'd be useful, given the staffing requests that we've been thinking about.
Yeah. So with that, I guess we just I don't know if chiefs want to flip a coin, or who would like to go first. Well, we'll start with Chief Cheney. Yep, I got your spreadsheet. Let's see here. Let's see here. Get that.
Was that emailed out today, or is that from last week?
This was one email. It was the same spreadsheet.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Did Patrick and Doug get that?
no, he just wanted to kind of provide it and then go through actually on the
Oh,
slides.
Okay, I wasn't
So,
sure how easy
yeah,
that
it
was
was-
to
yeah.
see it.
Let me try to zoom in here a little.
You can't. My 51-year-old eyes.
Is it going to be a little?
Yeah.
Down that
Yes.
side corner,
Let's see
corner
here.
of the time.
I need a big magnifying glass.
I think part of the issue, some of this is kind of proprietary data, isn't it?
Yes, so, well, I mean,
We'll make,
technically,
certainly get the tables bigger, Chief. We can get them to zero in on them somewhere. So,
okay, thank you, Neil. This is, you're looking at calls for service data from 2012 to present with the asterisks. Obviously, we're not done with the year yet. With this data story becomes a story. And some of you were aware that in 2017, we switched over to a different CAD, a computer automated dispatch system, and RMS, which recategorized and sort of shuffled the deck when we brought on our new CAD system. So the things that we were capturing prior to that aren't currently what we're capturing exactly the same now. And so that in all of our data, you're going to see a shift sort of at 2017. In addition to that, and here's the challenge in working with Mueller, is just explaining the story behind it, is we had COVID years. Technically, we're still in COVID years. And if you look at the trends from the
COVID years are longer than regular years, right?
Yeah, they're definitely regular, or longer, to your point,
Move the
yeah.
graph over to start with
Yeah.
column A, so you can see the numbers. Because I think,
Yep. So, and another table here, we have the comparison to our MIPSIS agency consortium colleagues, which includes Verona, Fitchburg, obviously ourselves, Sun Prairie, and Middleton. They all see a dip come the COVID years, right? Fewer calls for service officers are taking care of themselves and were in fact ordered by my predecessor to not be as engaging as they normally would because of this unknown thing at the time called COVID. So you're going to see a data dip in the calls for service as it relates to how we were collecting them from 17 on, as well as during the COVID years. We're trending back up. And what I can tell you is that When I got here, I saw that we were going to a lot of calls, taking up officers' time, and when we were wanting them to focus on things like traffic enforcement and spending their time on these mental health calls that they really needed to spend time with. And so I created operating procedural policy as it relates to a couple of different things. Number one, traffic crashes. We would go to dozens of traffic crashes a week at Walmart, at Pier 37, at your Menards, for example, where those are fender benders. And your officers were out responding to non-reportable crashes and taking reports. Well, that generated a police number and that generated a report. That's not reflected since I got here in 2021 when I stopped all that, because I want them to focus on other priorities. People still have the option to report the crashes. It's just not responding, it's just not a police officer responding. We can't write a ticket for a fender bender in a parking lot. So in essence, you're dealing with an insurance issue that your police officers were paid to go and take a report on, in which they couldn't determine who's at fault and who's not, right? Dozens of these we were taking. And so you're going to see a dip in the numbers as it relates to that. Policies have changed in terms of retail theft and dollar amounts that the DA's office is willing to prosecute or not. So we are no longer responding to $50 or less retail theft complaints. As you can imagine, with Walmart at one time being open 24 hours a day, we were going to a significant number of retail theft calls at Walmart alone. Their change in business practice, the fact that we're not responding to retail thefts where it's less than $50. There are some exceptions, right? If they're a repeat, or if they stole something before that, or they're suspected of doing X, Y, and Z, we will go. But generally, the candy bar retail thefts at Walgreens, we are not going to. We used to. So that number is changed in our data as well. And it's because I saw this real sort of what the cops were spending their time on. And I'd heard it from the community early on that they would rather see them on the roads and dealing with these significant mental health calls at Tellurian and others than addressing some, what I would consider a minor infraction.
And didn't you say Walmart is also no longer 24 hours?
Correct.
Store, which I didn't realize. So.
Yep. And they took advantage of the COVID years, the early COVID years, to switch from a 24-hour open store policy to, they actually close at 11 o'clock. Currently, if you've not been out there late hours. So that has had a large impact. If you look at the data, and I've gotten this question before, you might think, oh, well, then you have more time on your hands. Well, we actually don't. And if you compare us to, if you go to the Times tab, please, Neil, the bottom, yeah.
Just gonna get that one, hold on here.
Your officers, this is data looking at average officers on a call and how long they're spending on calls. We're going to more complicated calls. The laws have changed, for example, in an OWI and things that we're expected to take and collect as evidence. Blood, taking blood evidence versus everything typically being a breathalyzer. Blood evidence is something that involves having to go to the hospital for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So your officers are spending a lot more time on some of these calls than they have traditionally because of things out of our control. You've heard it probably from my predecessor, certainly from me, in regards to Mendota Mental Health Institute not being an option for emergency detentions and your officers having to travel to Winnebago Mental Health Hospital in Winnebago County, and that two-way trip is pretty much that shift of that officer. The time that they get medical clearance at a local ER, ship them convey that person to Winnebago, intake process at Winnebago, and the drive back. That's pretty much their whole shift, right? That leaves you void of officers. We typically try to get an officer in from another shift or an officer on overtime, but I'm just giving you a smidget of some of the examples of which things are out of our control in which your officers are spending more time on. So not only is it important for me to do things like these procedural adjustments and allowing your officers to be more free, they might not be available if I didn't do this to respond to some of these calls because of the circumstances as they are, because of those aforementioned things. I can tell you that another example of something that I changed procedurally had to do with the shift in the law allowing private property owners to tow vehicles on private property with notice, so they have to have it posted for parking restriction, et cetera. But the law now allows that private business to contract with the tow company to tow the vehicle. That didn't used to be the case, where we were responding to private property parking violations, a significant number of them that, of course, counted in your data. We no longer do that. Only handicapped and disabled parking violations or fire lane violations are typically what we're called to on private property. We do in some instances, some abandoned vehicles, just to make sure they're not stolen. We have had several stolen vehicles abandoned in our jurisdiction. But for the most part, that's being handled by the private entity themselves. They're not communicating, other than letting us know what vehicle was taken by the tow company. We're not involved in that process. There is a, let's see, are you curious about Walmart calls, since I talked about it? Can you go to the Walmart tab?
I told him what I've always remembered. Doug was here at Patrick wasn't, but Wally doing a report on Walmart calls him on other things, and at one point, remember, Doug, it was like 1,000 a year.
And you're seeing that in the, you know, the 2012 to the, to sort of when I got here. I don't take credit for this. There's a lot of factors that go into play, like I mentioned, but having them not being open 24 hours, because you think about it, that's including your night shift going to these retail theft calls, that they're no longer going to these retail theft calls. Instead, they're doing OWI enforcement and other things on the Beltline that I think we ought to, I think that that's good, that they're focusing on other things. Can you go to mutual aid if there are no questions on Walmart? Can you go to mutual aid, and we're wrapping up here? Oftentimes I get asked how often we're in Madison or how often Madison comes to us. We don't have the luxury of capturing that data as much as fire does, just based on how agencies collect data. But what we do collect is when we are requested to respond elsewhere for mutual aid. Your agency pulls a case number for that. I don't have readily available the data that McFarland has on how many times they've come into our city, for example. What we did in the assist calls in Monona, not PD, we looked at all the calls in which police agencies have responded into the city of Monona, in which Monona Police has not been a part of. Now, that's not to say that they were helping us on a call or that we weren't able to service a call so that they came in on a mutual service request, because we don't have that data readily available. These are all the times that we were able to figure that there was a cop in Monona in which we weren't sharing the call. That's that top line in which you have, you know, this year, for example, there's been 285 cases of
What type
that.
of thing is that for?
Dane County Sheriff might, because they're deputies, they might be following up on an investigation. And they might
Okay.
stop out on an address on Birch Haven, for example.
So they
and-
could be here for any reason?
Correct.
Could they be here for lunch? I mean,
No, so they're generating a number. Yeah, yeah.
they do let you know they're here? Because
No.
not always,
No,
right?
we've been working with my former colleagues at Madison and better communicating things. Madison actually executed a search warrant at the Current, and I didn't know about it till the next day. A full-on SWAT search warrant. So we are working with our partners to make sure that they better communicate things like that to us. But that's a perfect example. The courtesy would be to, obviously, as we would do, let the agency
Well, that's how
know.
we had that fire down in Tecumseh a couple of years ago.
It was a search, yes, yeah.
I took all the photos for that fire. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But we are, I mean, the number that you're looking at below, the Monona PD Assist Agency, a lot of that's our canine handler being requested. We use Madison Canine for sniffs almost just as much as they use our canine. And because our access to the Beltline, we can get from one side of town to another easily.
Do they use our canine quite a bit?
We do.
No, do they call for ours quite a bit?
They have, I think they have 7 or 8
Seven, okay.
canine officers. Don't quote me. I think they're about 8. And so they typically have their shifts covered. But like anyone, their cops get time off, et
Sure.
cetera, or might go out and out of service, or might be busy on the other side of town, for example. If we're close, we respond, because they do the same for us on traffic stops when we need a drug sniff, for example.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do other communities other than Madison have canine unit?
Yep.
Like just Fitchburg?
Yes, yep, Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, McFarland, they all, Monarchy, they all, I think Monarchy. And Cottage Grove, yeah, so.
Interesting.
Any other questions I can answer? So I'm asking, if you recall, I'm asking for a supervisor on our day shift. If you go to calls, please, Neil, the calls tab, and scroll over to the chart. Can you scroll down, please? I think that there's something for calls for shift. If you recall, I'm asking for a day shift supervisor. A lot of this data is what I was feeling and seeing on the streets, in which are your day shift officers used to be called retirement officers, right? Because typically, back in the day, your day shift is when you can like grab your cup of coffee, you know, and sort of
Donut.
interact, and donut, and those days are gone. Our day shift is extremely busy between the Beltline stuff, I'll call it, and that's when people discover that, you know, something was stolen, or that they've been a victim of a fraud, or, you know, another similar case. We've also been experiencing a lot of complicated calls on the day shift, and our officers haven't been available, or they needed supervisory support. So that's often me responding, or one of my, you know, Assistant Chief Duman, or Kurt heading out. But I'm also seeing that I'm like the chief over here, not as much, but I'm going on calls because our cops aren't available. The library had a call not too long ago in which there was a person in distress. Our cops, one wasn't available and one was coming from Southtown, and this individual was going to leave in a car and shouldn't have been driving. Not impaired, but some cognitive issues at play. I, of course, was finishing something up in the office and ran over. That's fine. I'm a cop too. I wear all the gear. That's great. That day I wasn't wearing this. That day I was in full uniform with all the equipment and tools and readily identifiable as a police officer. You're going to want your day shift to have support. You're going to want your day shift to have a supervisor, which they currently don't now, for provide some mentorship, some support with some of these high complex calls, and that supervisor also serves as an extra body in the street. Now we pull the crow, obviously, when we need to, but I've got the crow. I'm taking things off his list. I've got the crow doing a lot of work, including some traffic stuff, which is segue into that. I'm asking for a traffic officer to help with some of these concerns that I've talked more than once about to this group and to full council. I think this community deserves a dedicated, obviously my take, a dedicated traffic officer to help address these problem-solving issues. And that's it.
Okay.
Any more questions, anyone?
Yeah.
Good.
So how many officers do we have right now?
21, including myself.
Okay, so this would make it 22, and then the supervisor that's an add-on for somebody who's already working.
Yes. Yeah. And keep in mind, when I was asked sort of the question of your needs, I'm not thinking 10 years out. You know, things are trending upwards. So when I responded to that request, I was thinking of a 3-5 year out need, and not necessarily anything beyond that. At Cottage Grove, you know, they're operating, I think, 14, 15 officers, but they're in a different situation as us. I get it, because they're expanding and their net new construction is through the roof. But they're adding a significant amount of officers to keep up with their increased calls for service as well. I think they're 4 or 5 in which they're getting projected in the next three years. I'm not asking for that, but I don't want to be capped off at 1, is what I'm getting at, Alderwood. Because I think that there is a chance, if I'm still here 7 years from now, that's still within my retirement age, I might be asking for that help.
But as far as the referendum goes, you're asking for 1 plus the supervisor.
Plus the supervisor promotion.
But you're not promising that will always be the case.
Right. Thank you. That's a great way to say it.
And all in all, we may see where the final recommendation comes in on that. For planning purposes, we may be, at least from my office, maybe suggesting the chief add that position in. If it's a long-term, if we're designing, for design of the facility, if it would have an impact, we may be suggesting that position be added in for planning purposes.
To the referendum or to the?
For the capital planning, for the facility, but not just for the referendum, no.
And the other thing I'll mention briefly, I know the chief's behind me, is an important discussion on sort of line item increase. Mayor mentioned that to you and Neil and Mark. We have one of the lowest training budgets of agencies around us, and I think we work wonders with our training budget, but $8,800 a year for 21 cops. Just for example, Cottage Grove gets double that, and they have 14 officers. So I'm appreciative of what you give me, but things are costing money, and when we look at things such as our DEI efforts and want to make sure that we do more than just the bare minimum, I think we have to think about funding training for the police department. So that's it. That's my spiel. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
A low pressure system, my knees are hurting.
Before you start, so other things like that aren't personnel related, we're gonna get a different, another separate list, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there's 3 or 4 pieces that make up that operating referendum.
Right. Okay.
Good evening. I'm stalling to give Neil time to bring up.
I'm working on it, coming.
Well, while he's bringing it up, I'll start with a little bit of history of why we're at where we're at right now. You all know we're a combination department. We work with a combination of full-time, part-time, and volunteers. Going back to 10 years from data from the dispatch center, even up to 5 years ago, we had a significantly higher number of volunteers in Monona. Most of them were older. We've had several retire, and most of the volunteers coming in nowadays are either college students or what I consider transient. They're here for a year or two while they're looking for a job, and then they leave. So our pool of people to draw from within the city itself has diminished considerably in the last 5 years. 2 of our biggest heavy hitters in the volunteer realm have both been here 45 years. My 2 assistant chiefs, they're here all the time. Dan pulls 2,000 hours a month, or a year, 200 hours a month. He just turned 69. I'm not going to have him forever. I will say he will retire before I will. I'll just put it that way. So I did pull the data that was requested, but the data that I use for the historical data, so the 10-year span, comes directly from the dispatch center down in Madison. Our internal information has been fragmented over the years because we use different reporting softwares. So anything past where we switched over to LifeQuest in 2021, that data is no longer available. That company's out of business. There is no other than anecdotal data. So in the interest of giving you a solid 10 years worth of data, that's what was used for the historical data for call volume. So
The data that we had from that company that's now defunct?
yes,
Okay. So
they got bought out.
Right, okay.
So the server,
We have access to that data.
oh no, the billing company turned the patient care records over to our billing company, but it doesn't contain the data we would need to do more than, I can have them run data on the call types and that sort of stuff, but when it comes to response times, none of that got transferred over. It is not part of the patient care record. So in the interest of keeping solid data that we can look at for every year, we can go to the next slide. That's what I'm talking about. All the data for the 10-year comparisons comes from Dane County. So I talked to Dane County, went back to 2014, which is when they started with their new CAD system for fire and EMS, and I pulled all that data. I had them pull all that data for me. The 3-year, all the specific stuff, there's a lot of specific questions that I can do from when I started here until now. That's stuff I can pull out of our current software package. So the numbers from internal to what Dane County shows are different. So all of our runtime stuff, all the 10-year historical data is based on Dane County's way of doing things and how they classify things. So if I run an EMS call and fire gets attached, as far as Dane County is concerned, it's a single call. So they'll have an EMS call and then fire units get attached to that. Same thing for mutual aid calls, we get attached to a single call, so they don't generate multiple calls. Internally, I split those numbers. So I have EMS calls and I have fire calls. The fire calls include when we respond to EMS calls, for me to be able to track when we have volunteers responding. I can't lump them into the EMS call. They have if they jumped on a fire apparatus and they responded, I have a way to track our paid on premise, paid on call folks. So our internal numbers show a higher number because we split the calls. So I have 2 buckets internally. For the numbers from Dane County are all single call regardless of what it is. So if it's an EMS call and our engine responded, it's still 1 call. It even made a fancy graph for me that I didn't even have to do, it just created it for me. So this is our 10-year call data, dating back to 2014. The number in 2023 is like Chief Cheney's, it's got an asterisk because we're not to the end of the year yet. I just did some extrapolation based on.
Make that a little bit bigger, Neil? So they can see the numbers maybe, I don't know.
My faculty advisors from ambulance service manager would yell at me for that because we had a whole thing just on presentations, so that it needs to be big enough that you can actually read it from the back of the room. So the 14-21, you'll notice that's the dip, that's our COVID year, and it's been trending upward ever since. The 16-40, I will say we've exceeded that already. We've had 5 calls today. From when I put this data together last week, the 2 swings ago, they had 15 calls in 48 hours. So calls come and go. But so far, trending-wise, we're up about almost 22%.
Neil, do you want to bring that over so you can see the numbers on the front?
This is a PowerPoint, Mayor. I can't, I'm limited in what I can, I can.
I was
slide
asked
over,
for a
but-
presentation. I put a
Yeah, so-
presentation together.
Do you think the first 2 numbers are from when we were just making the switch to paramedic? Which then resulted in more calls?
Possibly.
Yeah, we checked into that today.
So we,
Fire weather
1303 in 2014, we switched over to paramedic, I believe in 2013 is when we switched over to
It was
paramedic.
kind of over a period of.
Yeah, it's a
couple
2-year
years.
period of implementation.
So really,
Yeah.
it hit that 1536 is probably a little more comparable to what we do now in terms of numbers. And we didn't have as many firefighters then.
Correct, we started
Paramedics
adding folks
either.
in 2016, 1 per year up through 2018. So all the staffing that I'm asking for in the referendum is basically to add 1 per shift. 1 more full-time firefighter, paramedic per shift. Because since I've been here, one of the issues that we have, and I focus a lot on the second ambulance because that's the majority of our calls are EMS calls, anywhere from 80 to 83% depending on how you want to run the numbers. The issue that I have since I've started here is we don't have enough staffing for our fire calls. That's the true issue. The benefit is we gain staffing to staff the second ambulance when needed. But going back to the Owen Road fire, we were at minimum staffing that night. We had 2 full-time staff on. We had no volunteers on the schedule, and I had Dan responding from home at 3:30 in the morning. When we get there and the entire building is on fire and through the roof, my 2 firefighter medics geared up, went into that building with no hose line, no safety team outside, no engine even on site yet. Even if they had hopped in the engine, the problem is I don't have an operator then because I can't send 1 person to the building and 1 person stay at the engine. So we trained to NFPA standards. That's how all of our training's been for as long as Dan's been here, not just me. So we're training these people to safely be able to go in on fire calls and then asking them to do something that's completely against that. I have a problem with that. This allows us to staff an engine better, but also gives us the benefit to catch additional EMS calls, do more things with the staff that we have. That's why I'm asking for the staff that I'm asking for. It's not just second ambulance staffing, it is fire staffing. I should have 4 people on scene to give 2 people in and 2 people out. That's what we train for, that's how Madison College trains, that's just how the fire departments operate. My 2 firefighter medics for Owen Road went into the building without a hose line to help evacuate the 80-some people that were in there. And thanks to our friends at PD, they also went in there without gear to try and help get people out of the building.
How quickly did mutual aid get there?
Mutual aid got there about a minute after our engine got there. So we got there with the engine 8 minutes after the call came in, which is great. we had 2 people on the engine, 2 volunteers. Then the next engine was 13 minutes after the call came in. So the real goal is to provide the staffing for the times we need it, and then be able to use it for other things that we can use them for, such as the second ambulance staffing. I can tell you, like the Pheasant Hill fire that we just had earlier this year, the same thing. The first in, we had a total of 4 people, Dan and our 3 full-time staff. With that, we can't do interior operations. So if there's somebody in the house,
I thought you said you needed 4 people for a fire.
4 people on the engine. I had Dan and my 3 full-time staff. So the ambulance got there with 2 people, the engine got there with 1 person, and Dan responded from home. That particular night, we were short-staffed with the amount of fire that was showing. Thankfully, again, to our police partners, Officer Genther grabbed the large diameter and literally hoofed it 300 feet with a large diameter hose to give us water access, because we just didn't have the people to spare. And he was a firefighter before he went to the dark side of the police department. So he knew what to do, which was fabulous, because the people we had focused on getting defensive fire operations up because of the amount of fire. So we're trying to pull equipment off the trucks and get them set up. When you go defensive like that, that tank is empty in 3 minutes with what we carry on the engine. So we've got to have a water supply. Thankfully, Officer Genther was on scene and was very athletic and managed to hook the hydrant for us. Same thing with the Midmore fire that we had late last year. Heavy fire when we get there, and we had the same, we had 3 people again. We had Dan and 2 other people responding. So we went defensive right away, which is great. I mean, we had...
And that was a Saturday afternoon, right? And no
Yes.
volunteers came.
That goes back to my original thing at the beginning here. The pool of people in Monona just isn't there
We
right
have like
now.
40 volunteers.
We have a total of 41, actually.
I guess it makes me wonder why we're training all these people if they're not gonna,
If they live outside the city, it doesn't matter.
well, I know, but we do have some who live in the
We
city,
do have
right?
some, but the problem is it falls on the same 6 or 8 people in the city to always be available to respond. And again, we have 2 or 3 new volunteers that live in the city that are very active. They're here, they respond on every call. I can give a great example just from Friday night. We had a mutual aid call from Oregon for our ladder because they had the big house fire down there. We were out the door with 4 volunteers in 4 minutes. And only one of them was at the station. But it was 3 of the 6 or 7 that are always in the city that showed up. And one of them happened to be an aerial operator, so we could honor that mutual aid request. We immediately got a call within Monona, literally 6 minutes after they went in our house, a fire call in Monona.
And what happened with that?
It went fine. It was it wasn't what it was dispatched out for. I'll just leave it at that. It ended up being taken care of by the firefighter medics on the ambulance and Dan. So the whole ask out of the referendum is to build the support going forward, because you'll notice what I'm asking for in the referendum is not just those. I'm looking 2-3 years down the road when Dan needs to retire. There's nobody in the department that can replace what Dan does. We're going to have to pay for an assistant chief. There's simply nobody that can do it. I have somebody in mind to replace my other assistant chief when he retires, from the administrative side and things to do. But from the operations side, there's nobody on the volunteer ranks that can do what Dan does. Plus, he has a paramedic license. And none of my volunteers have a paramedic license. So the ask was, from when I first started here in October of 20, it was either the November meeting or the December meeting that, hey, my approach for staffing is these 3 prongs, and it's the full-time staff, the volunteer staff, and an intern program. And that's what we've been working toward, is trying to build that. So that's why what's in the referendum ask is what's there.
Did you have more slides to show?
Oh, I have like 10 slides, but that's the staffing levels, which we just talked about. The response time data, I did you all a favor and did not put the response time data as a whole in here. When I requested from Dane County, it's like 380 pages worth of data. I put the summary in there. So what that shows is the first number is year, the second number, which Jim forgot to put 2017 in there, but the data's in the full package. That second number is how fast we get out the door with our first unit. That shows our full-time staffing with our minimum staffing. The first unit's the ambulance generally out the door. National standard is 2 minutes. As you can see, the last 10 years we've hit under 2 minutes getting out the door on average. And the response time You'll notice a dip in 2020 down to 36 minutes as an average call time. That was because we didn't transport a lot of people during COVID. We would show up, we'd do some vitals, determine A, if they didn't really want to go to the hospital because they thought everybody was getting sick at the hospital, and B, medical direction allowed us to leave people at home as opposed to transport them, so they were back in service that much faster. The number unfortunately continues to climb. The cases that we're dealing with our aging population are getting quite a bit more complex medically, so trying to figure out what we need to do. Our medical direction team empowers us to do a lot of stuff on site. We're basically a mobile ER for all intents and purposes, so we can do a lot of stuff on site. The only time we transport, back when I started, even further back when Dan started, it was put them on a wood board, put them in the back of the hearse at that time, and take them to the hospital. We do a lot of stuff on site now. We have full cardiac capabilities, we have full medication capabilities, and with our protocols, we're allowed to do a lot of stuff on scene before we transport.
Mayor, can I ask a question? Chief, can you talk about the current legal situation that's going on? That's about what paramedics may or may not be able to do based on the liability
You
position?
must be speaking, are you speaking of the Elijah McClain case in Colorado?
Yes, I am.
That is still in court. The defense is speaking right now. For those that aren't familiar, Elijah McClain was a young man in Denver. Police responded. There was some resistance of some sort, whether how valid that is, I won't lay a claim to. But they restrained him and called for medics to give him ketamine to calm him down, to take him to the hospital. The paramedics, in my opinion, did not do an appropriate job. They did not assess him correctly. They didn't document their assessment, and they gave him a larger amount of ketamine than what his weight should have taken. And he died in police custody. So they are facing 11 charges each at the paramedic level. It is the first time that I'm aware of, and speaking with one of the lawyers that we work with on EMS stuff, and the first time he's heard of it, that they have actually criminalized failure to follow protocol, which is a very slippery slope to go down. Generally speaking, malpractice is a civil issue. It's not a criminal issue. This case has criminalized the paramedics not following their protocol. Should they be found guilty of that, I feel we will see a larger number of folks leaving this industry than we'll be able to support.
And generally, there's a immunity.
Yeah,
We
there's
have,
qualified-
like
there's
cities have
qualified
for several
immunity.
other services we provide, but especially that one.
On the civil side, yeah, that's the problem. If they criminalize it, that opens a whole new door to, oh, you didn't give aspirin like protocol said, I can sue you now in criminal court and charge you because my outcome was worse than what it should have been if you would have given me aspirin. Lot of eyes are watching that court case right now.
I bet.
Could that affect our service levels, depending on what happens there? I mean, directly, obviously, if it affects staffing, but.
Hopefully not.
Okay.
Unfortunately, because of that, the legislature in Colorado got involved and is now approving protocols for EMS use with people who have no EMS experience. It's a boat we would rather not be on.
Seems to be a common thing these days.
Yeah.
What else did I have in there, changes in call type. Unfortunately, the Beltline does not get any better. Newer buildings, unfortunately, between the height and the building materials, they just burn hotter and they burn faster. And our population has actually been climbing on a pretty regular basis over the last 3 years. And I think that's about it. I don't think I added too much in there. There's the referendum request. I think we've touched on most of that. I spent a lot of time on this PowerPoint too. I already talked about the benefits of adding the staff. One of the big things that are the bottom 2 points. Mental health is a real big issue right now. We're in the process of creating a peer support team with our partners at PD. But retention is a big one. People are jumping ship and going. Unfortunately, it's a buyer's market for paramedics. I just met with Chief Dostalik from Fitrona this afternoon. They're finding the same thing even on the single role medic side. It's just a buyer's market. And if they're in a place that they don't feel supported, they're just going to go someplace else. Whether or not they're supported better or not there, I can't make that claim, but I think I took all the rest of it out of them. There are some risks, yeah. But that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer questions, if any, more.
I had one, I guess, in the original, the new staff request for referendum document we got includes a $93,000 increase for POP and POC. And I guess if we're having this dire shortage of volunteers, why do we need more?
So the proposal that I have for the POP program is to eliminate the paid on-call portion of it altogether. We only pay you if you're at the station, or if you respond to a call when you're not at the station, you get X amount of dollars based on the POP rate. The biggest cost increase on that, the majority of that is bringing our POP stipend up to match what Dane County departments are paying their folks for POP. So right now, if I have a firefighter that stays, Friday night I had Marissa here as a firefighter. She makes $30 for a 12-hour shift as a site. This brings us up to closer to what other departments are paying their POP folks to be at the station. Sun Prairie, it's $150 for a 12-hour shift.
So for a PIP though, if there's a call, they get paid for that. So.
They do.
So if it's 5 calls in a night, they'll get $15 for each call.
Yeah.
So if it's busy.
So they don't just make $30.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a rolling number.
It's $30 plus the number.
$30 is the on-call call, basically, and then the 15 per call.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the big changes that I made when I first started here, they had what they call the duty crew, where they'd have 3 or 4 people on POP pay, but not at the station. They'd be at home, and what we found is we had full-time staff that wouldn't necessarily respond on EMS calls if they were on. Even if I had 3 on, they wouldn't take the engine, they would just sit there. So our POP members, hearing the pager go off, would come down to the station to find out, well, we're not even going anywhere. And then the next shift, somebody would respond to every EMS call with fire. So then the duty crew would stop responding, basically, because, okay, well, I don't know if we're going anywhere, so I'm not even going to come down to the station. So we eliminated all of that, so, which is why if we have the staff on shift, fire goes on the calls. We had to make it simpler. We didn't allow a judgment call to be made, because there were certain shifts that would judgment call and not go on any EMS calls.
So now that's why fire always goes with
They were supposed to be
ambulances?
going on all EMS calls even before I started, but the full-time staff were given the discretion to either go or not go, and depending on shift, there were individuals that didn't feel it was worthwhile for them to get out of bed to go on EMS calls. So we were paying a full-time member to stay at the station and not respond to calls. So that has been corrected, and the expectations were made clear when we eliminated the duty crew thing as well. So you have to be at the station for POP pay.
Okay. Any other questions? Patrick, did you have anything?
I do not.
Doug?
Just, a comment, I guess. So we have to keep an eye on the total bottom line of what we're asking, and at some, so we have to, it doesn't do us any good to ask for more things than people will approve.
And I can appreciate that. Again, the ask was what our need was, which is what I put it. I understand that we may not get everything that we need. I understand that. Stuff like the assistant chief position isn't even slated until 27 at the earliest. It's based on when Dan retires. Same thing with the intern program. It's based on the PSB being open, where we're in a place to actually house the program. So there are things that may get cut out of that to bring the bottom line down. I fully understand that. But the ask was what our need was, and I say that's what was put forth. If things need to get cut, I understand that. It's the nature of municipal business, so.
Okay. That's all I got.
All right. Neil, did you have anything else?
I think that was it.
Anyone else? All right.
All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.